to public participation, and we have no public forum presentations, so we'll move directly to deputations by appointment, and we have 2 deputations by appointment in relation to the submission on the proposed block offer 2017, and then we have an additional deputation from Keep Our Assets on the item on the agenda in relation to the significance and engagement policy list of strategic assets. And so it is my intention to begin with the 2 deputations by appointment, and then we'll move to the submission on proposed block offer 2017, and then we'll hear the submission or the deputation from Keep Our Assets, and we'll move then straight to the item on the agenda in relation to the significance and engagement policy. So that's our work cut out for us, and we may even stop for morning tea at the end of that. So if I could invite Sienna Fitzjohn and Dr. Paul Brodie to speak on behalf of Oil-Free Otautahi regarding the staff report on the submission of proposed block offer 2017. Welcome.
Thank you. I think I'm starting the game off. I think I've got 4 minutes to submit that it would be environmentally irresponsible for us to open our offshore waters to the possibility of oil and gas exploration and possibly exploitation. And this is for...
Hang on, the deputation time is 10 minutes, but we do
suggest...
Sorry. Yeah, so...
4 minutes. 4 minutes for me.
Oh.
Then I hand over to Sienna,
right,
who has... She's the lucky one with 6 minutes.
No, that's fine. And no, but do leave some time for questions if possible.
Right,
know, but you know, start the clock again. Sorry, that was my interruption. Carry on.
Right, thank you. Yeah. Well, our submission, as it said, is that we think it would be irresponsible to open up for oil and gas exploration and exploitation for environmental reasons. You might all have a handout. I feel naked without a handout. And on the front, this is a diagram of what they call the Earth system, the way planet Earth functions. Hugely complex, all these interacting factors, and you'll see in the middle a oil rig with a gas flare coming from it. So those activities have an effect on the whole Earth system. And it has an effect from the global level to the regional level to the local level. Let me start with the global level, and I'm sure you're all very familiar with this, but any oil and gas which is removed from our offshore waters will eventually be burnt. It will add to carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere, and as I'm sure you know, CO2 levels have now built up to over 400 parts per million, from 280 parts per million before the start of the Industrial Revolution. And this is having an effect on global temperatures. Global temperatures have increased by about 1 degree centigrade over the last century. Warmer temperatures are also occurring in the ocean. 90% of that extra energy that's captured by the atmosphere now goes into the ocean. It's warming the ocean. It will be changing the ocean currents, it'll be changing winds which stir the ocean. So the ocean is being mixed in a completely different way. And these changes will increase going into the future the more CO2 we put in the atmosphere. This has a huge effect on the biology. In particular, it has an effect on the microscopic plants at the bottom of the food webs. There is evidence that the growth of these microscopic plants is decreasing. If they decrease, there's less food for all those other organisms in the ocean. Fish, shrimps, birds, marine mammals. So that is a major concern going into the future. It would be irresponsible for us to put more CO2 into the ocean. It all contributes to these effects. The other major effect of increasing CO2 is acidification of the ocean. And again, you're probably aware of that. In fact, last Friday, local people were told, an article in the press last Friday, which you might have seen, mentions acidification of the ocean. The editorial in the press last Friday mentions global warming, acidification of the ocean, and more local effects of the possibility of oil spills as a result of oil exploration. And those articles were in response to a Ministry for the Environment report, which summarises effects of environmental change, including global warming, acidification on our marine ecosystem, far better than I can do in 4 minutes. So it's all here. This came out last week. New Zealand is slowly becoming much more aware of these issues. So there are major issues with relation to warming and acidification. There's also, of course, if exploitation of these reserves does occur, there's the possibility of oil spills. So this is where we think the precautionary principle ought to hold. In other words, if there is an oil spill, the effects could be absolutely devastating on the marine wildlife. And this is from marine mammals such as the Hector's dolphin. You're aware that the Hector's dolphin population is very low. It's under risk of extinction. Birds becoming oiled, drifting onshore, smothering seaweed beds. So huge possibilities of devastating damage to marine ecosystems. I'll finish there. Thank you very much. I've had my 4 minutes. Thanks, Sienna.
Thanks, Paul. Kia ora everyone, my name is Sienna Fitzjohn and this is the third deputation I've made to a local council on oil and gas block offers. So over the last 5 years, we have spent a massive amount of intellectual energy opposing deep sea exploration in New Zealand, and yet insanity continues to prevail. So if deep sea oil drilling goes wrong, it will wreak havoc on our marine ecosystems. If it goes right, it will wreak havoc on our climate. Oil and gas are fossil fuels, so let's start with climate change. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report stressed that if we are to avoid catastrophic climate change, 80% of known fossil fuel reserves must stay in the ground. Yet we have a government that is proposing that we look for more. The World Health Organization predicted that from 2030, an extra 250,000 human beings a year are going to lose their lives to malnutrition, malaria, diarrhea, and heat stress as a result of a changing climate. We can no longer hide behind a screen of scientific uncertainty. Climate change is killing people. But we hear this kind of information all the time, and human lives are fast becoming a statistic. While science can tell us what we might expect, it can't tell us how to care. So let's look at the economics. There's a huge economic risk associated with oil spills, and those are borne by the state. They also increase massively when you include the risk posed to all industries that rely on a functioning marine ecosystem. Our laughably low royalty rates ensure that we'd see pitiful rewards for plentiful risks. Even within a neoliberal economic model, exploring for oil and gas during a climate crisis is akin to flogging a decaying horse. It's up against absolutely all logic to risk the health of our oceans to pursue a fuel that is changing the chemical composition of our atmosphere. Now, when we make deputations to council, it is tempting to do what I just did. Outline all of the intellectual reasons that oil and gas exploration is a singularly stupid idea. Deep sea oil and gas exploration, but also that can come at the expense of our emotional understanding of this issue. Deep sea oil and gas exploration is not still on our government's agenda because of a lack of scientific understanding. It's still on our agenda because of a lack of empathy. For too long, we have let people in power dictate what counts as a sensible submission against their senseless proposals. Economic arguments are the veil that our leaders hide behind to avoid the moral implications of their behaviour. Keeping emotions out of reasoning is a way of keeping ourselves emotionally insulated from the impacts of our behaviour. Western industrialised nations have to stop pretending that our industries and lifestyles aren't causing immense harm to human and non-human beings. Climate change occurs because of the cumulative impacts of decisions made in rooms like this. Deep sea oil drilling threatens places that we love and creatures that we know, with a disaster that they would never recover from. Now, if that's not a good reason to be emotional, I don't know what is. And when we talk about the impacts of climate change, we're talking about the mass suffering of human beings, and an emotional response to that is completely appropriate. We've let science describe climate change as a story of rising CO2 in the atmosphere, when it's as much a story about capitalism, colonisation and exploitation. We will not be affected equally by this crisis. People's experience of climate change are going to depend on their race, their gender and their privilege, or lack of it. To me, climate change feels like a pleasantly warm winter in Dunedin, but to some, it's going to feel like starvation. Climate change will sound like burning forests, it will taste like dehydration, and it'll look like dying crops. I don't know what's more shocking, that one species could change the composition of an entire atmosphere, or that we know that our habits are killing people, and we still haven't managed to change them. We need to start taking responsibility for the effects of our industries and our behaviour. We need to recognise that the 2016 oil and gas block offer is an act of slow violence. This is because burning fossil fuels exacerbates the crisis that's bringing displacement, disease and death to a lot of people. So, either we have a government that cannot conceptually link deep sea oil exploration with the human impacts of climate change, or we have a government that can, and are still pushing ahead regardless. Either way, it's deeply concerning. Our coastlines should not be put at risk to prop up a dangerous industry that's in its death throes. If an oil spill were to happen off Canterbury's coast, we'd be the community dealing with the emotional aftermath. We've experienced the trauma of losing a city. Do we really want to invite the trauma of losing our marine ecosystems? Because I guarantee you, it won't be the oil executives or the national MPs that are clearing oil and dead dolphins from the beach. It's going to be us. As you all know, the public aren't permitted to formally oppose any of the oil and gas exploration processes, so we are relying on all of you, our elected local body representatives, to be a voice of moral reason. Oceans and coastlines are our home, they're precious to us, and to all of the other life forms that live along them. Putting living ecosystems at risk to pursue fuels that jeopardise humanity's very future on the planet is a very unique kind of insanity. The decisions that we make in today's world will affect people we will never meet, we will never love, and we will never laugh with. But they're still people, they're still human beings, and I think that we have a responsibility to look out for one another. So today I implore you not only to reject the block offers in the Canterbury Basin, but to take a strong and morally guided stance against the government's entire deep sea oil agenda. Because no amount of black gold in the world is worth risking human lives for.
Hear, hear.
I think that was such a strong submission that it actually would be diminished by asking any questions. So thank you so much for being so passionate about something that really matters. So thank you. Could I invite Brian Johnson?
Hi guys, Brian Johnston. I can't respond or reply to what was just being said. It was just the rantings of a mad religion. I'm here to speak at an article that was in yesterday's paper.
Excuse me for a moment. I just want to say that everyone's entitled to come to the council and express their views, so we'll hear those views. Yeah, no, I'm talking to you.
Yeah.
No, I'm talking to the audience. I'm just asking them to just listen politely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The council have been quoted in yesterday's paper as saying they're opposed to oil drilling off the coast. Many of the councillors were elected as independents, including the mayor, who happens to have a Labor background. That's not independent. When the council make a decision, we're not going to do something. They were elected by the people to represent the people. You should be going back to the people for a decision. It'll either have to be a sophisticated poll or a genuine referendum. The people will make the decision. That's the only way it can go. I'm not opposed to the oil. CO2 is not a problem. We could take it to 2,000 parts per million. we'll live quite comfortably. There's no problem. Dr. Patrick Moore, you can Google him. Norway is sitting on a sovereign fund of $850 billion, state-owned oil. 95% of the world's oil is extracted by state-owned governments. New Zealand, Australia, and the dopey 5%. Now, we can fight against this drilling and lose, and the whole lot will go to foreign owners. ExxonMobil, the other sisters. We're going to lose out completely. Or we can fight for our ownership or our share. Brazil let out 5 tenders a few years ago, 3 tenders. We will own the company, we will own half. There'll be an amount going back to the country. Whoever wants the other half, come in. The sisters weren't involved. The next tier of 20 oil companies all over each other to be involved. We can strike a good deal. We have to fight for New Zealand ownership, New Zealand participation, and not let it go down the drain. The current government, Key English, have hocked us into debt for 120 billion. We're technically bankrupt. We can't keep going on down the wrong path. Norway, $850 billion, the world's biggest sovereign fund, certainly outside of China. Are there any questions? I don't think I can say much more except to start repeating myself. I don't want to do that.
Yeah, perhaps if I just do a bit of an explanation. We're not the decision makers. We are making a submission on the government's block offer proposal, and the public are denied a direct input into that, which is why we've adopted this position on every block offer in the recent past, but this is a new council, and the new council is making the decision on the submission today. So I just wanted to make that clear, that by way of
But the
process,
council does have a bias here that they're opposed to it.
the previous council was completely opposed to all of the block offers that came up during our tenure, and I believe that this council may well adopt the same position. That's certainly the way that council staff have prepared the submission for us. Mm-hmm. But the debate will occur next, so you'll hear what individual councillors have to say. But if people have questions that they'd like to ask, that's fine.
I could add one more thing before I go. I better squeeze this one. And the royalty system is not working in our favour on oil. It's a secret what the royalty is. No, it's possibly as low as 20 cents a barrel. When the price of oil goes up and goes out through the roof, we don't get any more. Yeah. Wellhead price. We get a percentage of the wellhead price. Hasn't changed in 20 or 30 years.
There are multiple.
We are being looted at 5%. Australia gets 8%. Norway gets 1% because that's all they need. 1% of a huge amount's a lot of money. So they only get 1%.
Yeah.
We're being gouged by the oil companies. Fight for our share. Our 50% or our 100%. Yep. A group of businessmen came from Australia to Taranaki, AWO, Australian Worldwide Oil, I think they're called. They poured in a few million. They got the whole lot back in 3 or 6 months.
Yep.
We've got to do something for ourselves here, guys. Now, there was a couple of questions.
Yeah. The only question that I've got is, what about the risk? I mean, if there was an oil...
The risk?
The oil spill would kill our
There's
region.
no oil spill out of the North Sea. You can stand on the beach of California and see the rigs out on the ocean. They just sit there like a container ship. Yeah, not like these goddamn ugly windmills all over the countryside.
There can
We've got to get it right, guys.
But if there is a spill, what happens to our region?
North Sea, no oil spill. No, you've got to think right. You'll lose the fight and have nothing if you try to stop it. It'll go ahead if you don't want it. Fight for our share.
Tim and then Yanni.
I guess just the examples that you used, North Sea and California, they've got the facilities there. If there were a spill, I'm not sure of the history there, they've got the equipment to go and take reaction. Here, I think it's 7 days before we could get anything here, probably 10 days before anything could really be done. And on average, I think we're pumping in our wells, and I'm sure there are about 100 people here that can correct me if I'm wrong, about 10,000 barrels a day. So by the time, if there were an accident, by the time anything could truly be done, we would have 100,000 barrels of oil floating off the coast of Canterbury and South Canterbury, etc. We have the endangered Hector's dolphin, etc. I mean, we've got health and safety legislation, which in a workplace we have to take steps before we do anything, and yet for oil, it seems that we don't actually have to do anything to contain something, and we can react rather than proact.
What you're saying is other countries have got an instant response and we take a week. That means we're set up wrong, that's all. We just got to change it. Simple.
Right, well, look, thank you very much for coming along. I mean, we are very open to hearing everyone's points of view. That's what a council's all about. So thank you very much for making the time.
Let's get some money in the bank, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right.
In the last 30 years than 137 reef beaches.
Don't engage. Right, can we move